Legend of Total War here, and today I'm going to give you guys my opinion on the units that you should never recruit for every race in Total War Warhammer 3. So one unit from each of the factions that you're better off just recruiting pretty much anything else but that unit. They may not necessarily be the weakest unit in their roster, but they might be the least cost effective, the least tactically flexible, or the least convenient to recruit. And so basically recruiting any other unit but this one would be better for your campaign. And before we get into it, I do need to let you guys know that this video here is sponsored by Manscaped. You guys know I've been with Manscaped for ages. I love the products, love working with them. Today I want to show you the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra. It comes with the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra, Weed Whacker 3.0 for your nose hairs, the Crop Soother Ball Aftershave, and the Crop Preserver Anti-Chafing Ball Deodorant. Now I started with the Lawnmower 3.0 and I took it out for a test run the other day and it still works just fine. Don't get me wrong, the 5.0 is better, but my point is that these electric razors have lasted me for years. I've pretty much forgotten what it's like to nick myself shaving thanks to Manscaped. I stand by the lawnmower razors, and you can ask people in the comment section about their experience with it as well, if by now you still aren't convinced to try it out. Click on the link in the description or the pinned comment to get 15% off Manscaped products. Big thanks to Manscaped for sponsoring this video. When it comes to the Beastmen, the unit that you should avoid recruiting is largely based on their dread cost, since increasing the unit caps requires dread, and you need dread for just about everything. Wasting dread on Ungor herds is a complete waste. You're better off spending it on literally anything else. And the thing is, if you want Ungor herds, you've actually got access to an unlimited number of the lowest tier of them. And the regular Ungor herds with shields, they're only such a slight upgrade from the base version that it's not worth wasting any dread on it. Bretonnia is a faction that is filled with terrible units, but at the tippy top of their pile of dung stand the Grail Relique, a unit that has next to no combat potential whatsoever, and its entire purpose is just to buff other units. Basically, it's only capable of buffing terrible units because it can't keep up with cavalry, and so with your other terrible infantry, plus the Grail Relique, they'll actually hold the line for barely any longer. So it's a complete waste of time. Avoid recruiting them. You're far better off just recruiting anything else in your roster, because this is a totally unreliable unit, because the only thing it does is buff other unreliable units that are at least slightly better at combat than it. So when it comes to Grand Cathay, their roster is particularly strong, which makes this unit the obvious choice for a unit that you should never recruit, and that's the Sky Lantern. This unit is ridiculously silly, because it has no practicality whatsoever. It is a gigantic walking target. If the enemy has any missile units, they're going to shoot at this at the top priority because it's easy to hit. If they've got any flying units, they're going to take it out straight away because it can't land. You can't adequately protect them unless you bring long Marauders or something else, and bringing anything to protect this unit doesn't make sense because its damage output is basically the lowest unit in the entire game. It's so slow at shooting that you would need to give it about 10 or 15 minutes in order to deliver enough value to make it have been worth its value on the battlefield. If there's a unit like that that basically has no defensive capabilities and no offensive capabilities, and it's basically just a gimmick of, look, I can fly, there's no reason ever to recruit it. I wouldn't ever bother trying to buff it, because at the end of the day, Grand Cathay have got so many other better units, it has no tactical advantage for you whatsoever, so just recruit something else. So the Chaos Dwarfs are quite an interesting situation, because their best units are all locked behind unit caps, and their weakest units all have no unit caps. And so for the Chaos Dwarfs, I'm actually going to say that none of their units are units that you should never recruit. Every single one of them has a purpose. Their elite units all have various uses, so there's none of them that are just completely useless. And when it comes to their complete goblin trash, all of them actually do have a purpose, because at the end of the day, you are going to have to recruit some of these units into your army, and even their cheapest, weakest units, well, they're so cheap and so weak that the ammunition used by the enemy to shoot at them is actually worth more than their lives. And so they're actually fantastic cannon fodder for wasting ammunition of enemy high-tier archers and artillery. So every single unit within the Chaos Dwarf roster has a purpose. So not a single one of them is something that you should never recruit. So the Dark Elves have got a very strong roster, even at tier 1. But there's one standout unit that kind of just doesn't have any real purpose on the battlefield. At best, it just trades evenly, and at worst, it gets its ass handed to it. And that's the Bleak Swords. This unit has just got some basic stats and no tactical edge whatsoever. It's not anti-infantry, it's not anti-large, it's not so low in value that it's actually worth using them as cannon fodder, and because they require a military building to recruit, whereas dread spears do not, there is no reason to ever recruit a Bleak sword over a dread spear, because in the early game, you would want to recruit some dark shards to actually dish out damage, and the best unit for protecting them are the highest melee defense unit, which is a dread spear, which does not require a military building. So it's not only inconvenient, but it is outperformed by a unit that doesn't require a military building. There is no reason to ever recruit one of these. You have vastly better options at every stage of the game. So the Dwarf roster is one of the most reliable, the strongest rosters in the entire game. It's hard to pick out a weak unit amongst them. Even the Miners, their weakest unit essentially, has a purpose because it's the only unit that you can recruit without a barracks. But when it comes down to the Gyrocopter Brimstone guns, something weird is going on with this unit because it's not a bad unit, but it's recruited at tier 3, whereas the Gyrocopter, the unit that I said was you should always recruit, is recruited at tier 2. But regular Gyrocopters, 9 times out of 10, will outperform a Brimstone gun. The only advantage that a Brimstone gun has over a regular Gyrocopter is flaming attacks, and that's only if you're going up against something that's actually weak against fire or is doing some kind of healing, which is sometimes. But you are also more likely to encounter units that are resistant to fire, and so in those cases, Brimstone guns will be a disadvantage. Regular Gyrocopters are cheaper to recruit, they're cheaper to maintain, they have more ammunition, they've got longer range, they're more versatile on the battlefield. So like I said, 9 times out of 10, or even 99 times out of 100, a Gyrocopter Brimstone gun is going to be outperformed by regular Gyrocopters. And the times where you do have the Brimstone gun outperforming them, regular Gyrocopters should have been just fine anyway, because they can just about handle most units in the game anyway. So Brimstone guns are basically not bad units, it's just they're kind of redundant, especially with the addition of the Trollhammer Torpedo Gyrocopters, which has flaming attack and anti-large. So Brimstone Guns is a unit that is strong, but I would just get something else because you've got redundancy in your roster. So when it comes to the Empire, they've got a very similar situation to the Dark Elves, in that the unit that you shouldn't recruit is the Swordsmen. And it's basically the exact same reason, because you've got a unit that's recruited from the exact same building at the exact same tier that has a better versatility, which is the Spearmen with Shields. So Spearmen with Shields are going to be much better at holding the line to protect your missile units, because they've got higher melee defense and they've also got anti-large. Whereas Swordsmen, they have just stats. They're not anti-infantry, and they're not particularly brave. They're not particularly good at fighting other units of the enemies, such as like orc boys or skeletons, and trading anything other than evenly with them. So if they go up against anything other than a tier 1 unit, they're going to get turned into mincemeat, and so they're going to contribute to your eventual defeat faster, or make it more difficult for you to get the victory due to the balance of power loss from their death. They're an absolutely tactically useless unit, and you are better off recruiting literally any other unit in your roster than a Swordsman, especially considering a better unit is available at the exact same building at the exact same tier. Complete waste of time, this unit. So Greenskins have a huge roster, and the vast majority of it is absolutely terrible. But there is one unit that is completely bloody useless, and that is Goblin Wolf Riders. Greenskins have got a ton of cavalry units, and so recruiting a Goblin Wolf Rider doesn't really make any sense, because this unit loses to everything. The only purpose of this unit is to run down already broken units, and you've got plenty of other choices to recruit from that actually have some tactical edge. So this is a unit that just exists for the sake of existing, and basically is only ever going to fight against the absolute weakest opponents. And those are not the kind of units that you should actively attempt to recruit, especially considering it requires a military building to recruit. So avoid recruiting Goblin Wolf Riders, they're totally useless. So when it comes to the High Elves, they have some of the best archers in the entire game in any tier, but they've actually got some really weird situation going on with archers with light armor, which is the unit that I would recommend that you never recruit. This unit has absolutely no purpose whatsoever, because their regular archers can be recruited from a settlement building, whereas these ones require a military barracks, so they're less convenient to recruit. They have higher recruit costs, they have higher upkeep costs, and their damage output is identical to regular archers. The edge that archers with light armor actually have is actually a handicap, because they have increased combat stats in melee, but the thing is, with archer units, basically it comes down to two desirable ways to use archers. You either want your archers to have extremely low combat stats with really high damage output, because that way all of their value is in the actual missile attack, so that's what you're using on the battlefield, hyper focus, or you want your archer unit to just be super elite, like Sisters of Avalon or Lothern Seaguard. But having a archer unit that is low tier, but just like tier 1.1 is actually detrimental, because the enemy are more likely to target them. And the thing is, if you had two units of archers, one of them being regular archers, one archer light armor, the enemy will target the light armor unit, right? And the thing is, that unit's death will contribute more to your balance of power loss than your regular archer unit. And since their damage output is exactly the same, basically you are adding a vulnerability into your army by recruiting them. It's an incredibly stupid oversight that's been in the game forever. But yeah, there's absolutely no reason that you should ever recruit an archer with light armor. In fact, if you ever confederate another army and it has archers with light armor, do your best to replace them with the base version as quickly as possible, because these ones here are a detriment to your army. It's very silly, but that's a unit that I never recommend that you recruit. So Khorne has got a super strong roster. There's not a single weak unit among them. However, there's a very weird thing going on with Marauders of Khorne, because they require a barracks to be constructed, whereas a Chaos Warrior does not. They just need the settlement building. So anywhere that you can recruit Marauders, you can get the Chaos Warrior. And at the tier 1 Marauder building, you can also get the dual weapon variant, which is better. So there's really no reason to ever recruit a Marauder of Khorne unless finances are the problem. Which, if you're having financial or favor problems playing as Khorne, you're simply not Khorning hard enough, because if you go into a battle and you win, you'll make enough favor that you can recruit more units. That shouldn't be a problem. And if you go into a battle and you lose, well, then you don't have to pay your units anymore, in which case you can recruit more units. So you're not Khorning hard enough if finances are your problem. But basically, there's no reason to ever recruit a Marauder of Khorne over a Chaos Warrior, because a Chaos Warrior, even though it is more expensive, they are several times more effective. They will easily outkill several Marauders of Khorne because of their extremely high stats at tier 1, especially considering that no one else that you go up against is going to have anything close to being as strong as a Chaos Warrior of Khorne in a relatively fair fight. And again, if you get killed, well, don't worry, you don't have to pay them anymore. Kislev has got a really versatile roster. Their units have got some serious strengths, but also some serious weaknesses that go with them. And there's a really weird thing that's happening with war sleds, because the light war sled is available at tier 3. It only takes 1 turn to recruit and is quite quick. Whereas the heavy war sled is a tier 4 unit. It takes 2 turns to recruit. It is significantly slower, but it has higher durability. And the thing is, that is actually just a straight up downgrade for these units, because the primary purpose of the war sled unit is to shoot at the enemy first. And so a heavy war sled is going to get caught in combat way faster than a light war sled, meaning that it will not get as much opportunity to use up its ammunition, meaning its versatility on the battlefield is actually significantly lower than the unit that came before it, while also being more expensive, taking longer to recruit, and then also just not being as versatile on the battlefield. So its only advantage is if you are completely incapable of micromanaging, and you are going up against an enemy that's so ridiculously slow that the difference in speed between a light war sled and heavy war sled doesn't actually matter. But the vast majority of the enemies that you will face as Kislev are factions like Norsca and Warriors of Chaos and Khorne, and these guys have access to fairly fast cavalry, so the light war sled is going to be vastly more important to recruit than a light war sled. Definitely recommend not recruiting any heavy war sleds, it's just not worth it. The Lizardmen have got one of the strongest rosters in the entire game, but it's entirely backloaded. It's all at their late stage. In the earlier stages, you're quite limited in what you can recruit. And at the settlement building, you'll have access to Skink Cohort, which is a unit that I don't recommend that you ever recruit, and the Skink Cohort Javelin Men, which is a unit that, if you've nothing else to recruit, yeah, go for it. Because those extra javelins that comes with the Javelin Cohort is far more valuable than the extra upkeep costs translates to, because this is a unit that is capable of taking out big monsters right from turn 1, thanks to those javelins, whereas a Skink Cohort, it is only ever going to trade evenly at best or eat shit at worst. So you are far better off spending that little bit of extra money, even if that means getting fewer of them and getting the javelin variants. That way, if they bring any monsters in the early stage of the game, you can take them out with absolute ease. So there's no reason to ever recruit a Skink Cohort over a javelin unit. So Norsca's got a pretty strong roster. most of their units are quite viable. However, the unit that I would recommend that you never recruit are Norskin Warhounds, and it's simply because they're kind of redundant. They're recruited from the exact same building at the exact same tier as the Chaos Warhounds with poison, and while they are slightly more expensive, the poison attacks give them a massive edge over the Norskin Warhounds. Apart from that, they have the exact same stats. And when it really comes down to it, penny pinching for that amount of money really shouldn't make any difference to your budget, but it could make the difference between victory and defeat in a battle. So I would just avoid recruiting them, not because they're bad, but just they're redundant, that's all. So Nurgle's quite a unique case in Total War Warhammer 3, largely due to their recruitment pool. So their recruitment building cycles through the various different stages and adds in different units into your recruitment pool over time, which is available to be recruited globally. And due to that, their weaker units are part of the same building chains as the stronger units. So you're going to have access to all of your roster as long as you actually build the buildings. And because of that, there really isn't any of their units that you should limit yourself from, because sometimes you're going to need an emergency unit and your best unit just isn't going to be available for you. And sometimes a piece of crap is fine. And while they definitely have units that are maybe subpar, sometimes a subpar unit is better than nothing. And so Nurgle, you just shouldn't limit yourself in terms of any of their units. Make use of the entire roster, largely thanks to their recruitment pool system. The Ogre Kingdoms are a faction that's filled with monsters, and actually one of their monsters is something that I would recommend that you never recruit, and that's the Giant. And it's largely due to the fact that it's the slowest monster in their roster. At tier 3 you can certainly recruit it fairly early, but everything in your roster is pretty much a monster. You don't need additional siege attackers. While it is very good at taking out single entities, that really isn't the Ogre Kingdom's weak point. And so the Giant kind of just feels like it's there for the sake of being there. It doesn't really serve a unique purpose. All of its unique roles can be filled out by other units better within your roster. It is by far not the strongest monster, and its speed is the main thing that'll let you down. But apart from that, it's actually not a weak unit, it's just doesn't serve a good tactical purpose. The Skaven has one of the weirdest rosters in the entire game. They've got some of the weakest units in the entire game, but also some of the strongest, most powerful units in the entire game. And the thing is, in many cases, both of those two categories complement each other quite well, because their most powerful units are oftentimes long-range, high-powered, area of effect missile units. That is probably going to cause a hell of a lot of friendly fire. And if you're expecting to cause friendly fire, there's no better unit to cause friendly fire on than a unit that's worth absolutely nothing. Which is why I use summons and Skaven slaves to not necessarily hold the enemy back. I don't send them to pin them down. I send them to just run around like crazy, and the enemy are chasing their tails trying to catch them. Keeps them distracted while I shoot them, and if I hit my own units, who cares? I'll just replace them. So the unit that I would recommend that you never recruit are Stormvermin Sword and Shield, because if you try to do the same thing with them, you are more likely going to do more damage to your own army than to the enemy. Because killing one of your own Stormvermin units will hurt your own balance of power way more than if you kill one of your own summons or Skaven Slave units. And because Stormvermin Sword and Shield have no speciality, they're not anti-infantry, they're not particularly brave, they're not particularly good in combat. They're at best going to trade evenly and at worst eat a lot of shit. They're not really ever going to provide a hell of a lot of value, and since the Skaven roster is so friggin' good, this is a unit that just will very rarely ever perform above expectation, and so I would recommend avoid it and get all the better stuff. So when it comes to Slaanesh, their roster is quite brittle, but also incredibly fast. And rather than trying to mitigate your weaknesses, it's usually best to just maximize your strengths. And so the unit that I recommend that you never recruit within Slaanesh is a unit that tries to mitigate their weaknesses. And so that's the Spawn of Slaanesh. It's a fairly durable, unbreakable, tier 3 monstrous unit that is fairly good at holding the line. But holding the line is not really something that complements Slaanesh well. Their best tactics are hit and run, move so fast that the enemy can't do anything about it, wait until there's a vulnerability, we go in, hit them in the kidney, get out, and just keep hitting them until they're worn out, and then go in for the killer punch. And the Spawn of Slaanesh are incapable of doing that because they're so slow that basically infantry will eventually be able to catch up with them. And considering at tier 3 you've got access to another monstrous unit anyway, the Fiends of Slaanesh, and this unit has basically 3 times the speed and also the same contact debuff that Spawn of Slaanesh have, and is incredibly fast and is able to flank units super quickly and get out of there. these Fiends of Slaanesh are going to complement using monstrous type troops significantly better than the spawn of Slaanesh, especially considering most of the enemies that you go up against are going to have missile units and are going to kill your spawn incredibly quickly. So this is a unit that I would just not bother recruiting just because it doesn't complement the overall strengths within Slaanesh. So when it comes to the Tomb Kings, the unit that I recommend that you never recruit are Carrion. And it's basically the same reason as it was in Total War Warhammer 2. While they do serve some degree of tactical purpose, the fact that they are the only unit that is increased in unit cap from the public order building, all of your other roster are increased in unit cap from other buildings. You've got limited amount of build slots, and the public order increased building is just not something that you really need to build that often. And so it's actually the buildings that make this kind of not really a desirable choice. It's much better to increase the unit cap of any other unit will provide more value than the Carrion. Now, if the game had access to more build slots, then yeah, sure, build a couple of Carrion, no big deal. But this is a unit that is incredibly weak, and you're just so much better off increasing the unit cap of something else. So that's why I would recommend don't bother with Carrion. So Tzeentch is one of the weirdest factions in the game. There's so much bizarre stuff that can happen on the battlefield depending on your lords and heroes and various different abilities. And so your units will also have various different abilities and weird things that they can do. And when it comes down to it, there's not a single Tzeentchian unit that doesn't have some degree of purpose or gimmick or something that they can do that is actually really useful. They've all got access to barrier, they've all got access to magical attacks, and even their weakest units have some degree of purpose because you can use their weakest units to sacrifice them so that you can basically get unlimited winds of magic. And you can use their weird units with their various abilities to do all kinds of wacky crap. So there's not a single unit within the Tzeentch roster that you should just flat out never recruit. You just need to think about why you're recruiting them before you do so, that's all. When it comes to the Vampire Coast, they have a lot of units that are very squishy, so they die fast, but also dish out damage very quickly, so they kill fast. But they've got one unit in particular that is both squishy and also doesn't dish out damage. So the worst of both, essentially. So that is the deck droppers. There's 3 different variants of deck droppers, and I'm talking specifically about the ones with pistols. These ones have low range, low damage output, low entity numbers, and so their overall DPS is very low, but the value of it is supposed to be that, well, the melee infantry can't fight back. The thing is, because of your incredibly low damage output with a deck dropper unit, the unit doesn't have to do anything in order for it to actually beat your deck dropper, because it doesn't have enough ammunition in most cases to actually take out a single unit. And if it encounters a single enemy missile unit, there is not a single missile unit in the game that isn't capable of shooting a deck dropper unit down. It can't outrange anything, and so it's utterly pointless to try even attempt any kind of skirmish. It can't fight at all in melee, so in its versatility lies its true weakness. It tries to do everything kind of okay, and ends up doing absolutely nothing. So Vampire Count's a bit of a weird situation going on with them. They've got kind of a weak roster, but the true strength of the Vampire Counts lies in their lords and heroes. Now, with the Vampire Counts, you can recruit from buildings, but what I prefer to do is just recruit from Raising the Dead, just wherever I am. And so whenever there is a pile of corpses, there's usually units that pair up together. And so all variants of corpse carts you will usually find in the same pile of corpses. And so I actually recommend that you don't recruit a regular corpse cart, just because where you can find a corpse cart, you can usually find an Unholy Lodestone or a Balefire cart. But apart from that, they're good units, it's just that everything that they can do is done by the other variant, so they're just straight up upgrades, and it'll be an extremely rare case where you'll only ever see the corpse cart by itself without the other 2 variants alongside of it. So this is a unit that you absolutely do not need to bring a ton of in any given battle. 1 or 2 is just fine, so just pick up the Balefire cart or the Unholy Lodestone one, and that'll do just fine. Just avoid this one just due to sheer redundancy. And if you really want a corpse cart, then you can always put one of your necromancers on that as a mount, which of course they will get the Unholy Lodestone one and Balefire cart one as well. So again, it's just due to redundancy in the game. It's not necessarily that it's a bad unit. So when it comes to the Warriors of Chaos, the unit that I recommend that you never recruit is largely based on the unit that I recommend that you always recruit. And that unit was the Bile Trolls. Now, the unit that I recommend that you never recruit are actually Armored Chaos Trolls, and the reason for that is that you will never find out in the wild a recruitable Chaos Armored Troll. In order to create one, you have to find a regular Chaos Troll, which there's plenty of those around, get it to at least 3 experience, and then upgrade it. But the thing is, if you do that, a Chaos Armored Troll cannot become a Bile Troll. And so basically you disable yourself from getting the better variant by getting this piece of crap. So it is always better if you are playing as a Lord that is able to utilize the Nurgle upgrade, that is. There are some that don't. But it's always better to turn your regular troll into a Bile Troll. So just skip the Chaos Armor Troll now. So it's not that Chaos Armor Trolls are bad, it's just that Bile Trolls are the shit. Go for them instead. Way, way, way better. When it comes to the Wood Elves, they've got a really strong roster, but the unit that I recommend that you never recruit are just the regular, low-tier Glade Rider Spears. They're recruited at the exact same tier as the regular Glade Riders, and they're horse archers that actually have similar combat stats to Glade Rider Spears. Now, Glade Rider Spears are not anti-large, so they're not particularly good against anything. The main purpose of them is to basically just charge into weak missile units, which is something that their regular Glade Rider Horse Archer is actually able to do just as well. And the thing is, because they've got some ammunition as well on top of that, they will, in every single situation, outperform a Glade Rider Spear. They've just got way more damage output. And of course, you're not putting your lives at risk by always having to go into melee. You've got enough ammunition just alone in order to dish out enough value in any given battle. So there's not really a whole lot of value in just getting any Glade Rider Spears. Just get the regular Glade Riders instead. So that's my list for the units that you should never recruit for all races in Total War Warhammer 3. So if there's any of the items on this list that you disagree with, feel free to let me know down in the comment section. Explain your reasoning for it, and you might convince me otherwise. Don't forget to check out Manscaped, link in the description and pinned comment. And once again, thanks to them for sponsoring this video. Appreciate you guys, and we'll see you next time.